Alright, well, hello and welcome to my Aviation 350 Capstone project. You can probably tell right away that I'm not using video to capture my face. I spent about 2.5 hours today trying to figure out how to make that work, and I'm a nerd. I can usually figure that kind of stuff out, but to be honest, I kind of got frustrated and decided if I narrate the PowerPoint, that's better than nothing because I just wasn't able to get anything going. So this is the Capstone project about the 1nav and 2nav rules. I chose this picture here because this is a Mesa CRJ. I don't think I ever actually flew this one. I looked up the tail number. I think it was decommissioned before I even got on property, but I thought that was kind of neat since CRJ 200 was the aircraft we were using in our exercise anyway. So here's what's going to be in the presentation. We'll talk about the conditions in the dispatch release. That was the information that was in the slide from, or the video rather, from week 7 with some screenshots of all the criteria for the problems we're going to work out. So we'll jump into that. So we said we're CRJ 200 slant alpha with the flight director and autopilot in op, and we have a NOTAM for ILS 22 right glide slope being out of service. We also said that in our dispatch release, we are Liberty Aviation Airlines flight 1972 from Lynchburg to Little Rock with an alternate of Baton Rouge with an ETA of 1800 and our weather down here. We also, out of the FOM here, 4-1.7, we got our 1nav and 2nav rules here. We talked about that in the video. I don't think I need to rehash that. So just kind of to summarize the approach plates that were in that presentation, and those are at the end of this presentation. So if for some reason you want to go take a look at them, you don't have to jump back and forth. They're backup slides that are hidden at the end. So we got the ILS 1.3, we got 200.5. We got the localizer only to 22 right since the glide slope is NOTAM to OTS. We got 403/4. If it weren't NOTAM to OTS, we'll talk about that later on, then we'd have 203/8. That's kind of a screwy visibility. I think I've seen that a few times before, but not too common. VOR, at least in my experience. VOR 4 left, we got 551 feet, 1 3/4 viz, and VOR DME 22 right, we got 410 and 1 1/4. So jumping into some of the questions we wanted to discuss given those criteria. Number 1, so for the purpose of determining a weather alternate airport, what is the forecast weather for BTR Baton Rouge at our ETA, which is 1800 Z? Well, you're nice enough to give that one to us pretty much. So we got the condition here at tempo at 12 day of the month at 1800 Z to 12 day of the month at 2100 Z forecast. 1 statute mile visibility, rain associated with thunderstorms, broken 5 hundo and scattered at 2K with CVs. So there's our weather at our ETA. So now that we know that, what are the lowest legal 1 nav alternate weather minima for Baton Rouge, ceiling and visibility? So now I took that information and I had the slide before and I kind of put it into a chart. It's all the same numbers just in a chart format because that's a little bit easier to digest. So here are the approach minima, and we can put that side by side using the 1 NavAid rule. We're going to add 401 to each of these. So that makes our ILS 1.3 600, 1.5. The localizer only 610, 1 3/4. The VOR 4 left, I put 960, 2 3/4. I know in the CRJ, you're setting your MDA, it only works in increments of 10 feet. So best I recall, if you had an odd altitude like this where it was 951 feet, you had to round up to the nearest 10. So that would make it essentially usable for us, 960 feet, 2 3/4 viz. And then the VOR DME to 22 right, 910, 2 1/4. So going back to the question, what's the lowest legal 1 nav alternate weather minimums? That'll be for the ILS 1.3. We had that 401. That gives us 601.5. So of course, that doesn't meet our weather at the ETA, which is 501. So that kind of leads us into the next question. What are the lowest legal 2 nav alternate weather minimums for Baton Rouge? So same thing, here's our initial approach minimums, and here we go with 2 nav rule. So now instead of 401, we add 200.5. So for the 1.3 ILS, that gives us 401. For the localizer only, 222 right, we get 610, 1 1/4. And I struck out the ILS here because the glide slope's no tammed OTS, we can't use that. 4 left, same thing, rounded up to 760, 2 1/4. And then VOR, DME, 22 right, we get 610 and 1 3/4. So, what are the lowest legal 2-nav alternate weather minima? We get the ILS 13, 401, and the localizer only 610, 1 1/4. So we have to take the highest of the two, that's 610, 1 1/4. So even any combination of these two, if we had 400, 1 1/4 or 610 and 1, that still puts us above the 501 that was derived. Or not derived, but what our weather is forecast to be using the derived. So that takes us to question 4. Is it legal to use Baton Rouge as an alternate for this flight, and why? So the first portion, is it legal to use Baton Rouge as an alternate? Negative, it is not. And why? Kind of like we just discussed. The 1 nav aid rule and the 2 nav aid rule, there's no combination of any approach that's going to give us 501. Everything's going to be above 501. So we can see that here in this chart as well. Here's our 1 nav aid mins. Here's our 2 nav aid rule mins. And of course we struck out the ILS 22 right on both of those. So number 5, if we didn't have that NOTAM, if the glide slope were in service, what would be the lowest legal alternate weather minima? Well, if that NOTAM weren't there for the glide slope being out of service, we'd have 401 on the ILS 13 using the 2 nav aid rule, and that would make us legal to dispatch with that as an alternate. We can look here and see 1 nav aid, the lowest would be that ILS 22 right, that'd be 600 and 1 3/8, because that's the screwy 3/8 viz there. Still, that's not 501. Now, if we use the 2 nav aid rule here, we get 401 and 407/8, just shy of 401 also. But we take the highest of those two, that's 401. That's less than 501, so that makes it legal for us to use that as an alternate in that case. So the summary and my picture of Homer, because I'm a huge Simpsons fan. I try to sneak a Simpsons picture in in any presentation I do. So there's an episode where Homer was flying an airplane. So with the glide slope NOTAM'd out of service, obviously we cannot use that as an alternate. If that weren't the case, we could use that as an alternate, because with the 2 nav aid rule, we could use the higher of the two, so we get the other ILS, and that was at 401, and that'll put us in no problem. Now, of course, for the 2 nav aid rule, back up just a second, we do have to have 2 different runways with 2 different approaches using 2 different nav aids, which is satisfied, I meant to mention this before, by this being the ILS to 13 and then the ILS to 22 right. 2 runways, 2 separate approaches, and 2 different nav aids. So anyway, that's about all I have. I hope that answers all the questions. And again, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to figure out how to record the audio and the PowerPoint and me talking and get my face in there too, but honestly, I kind of got to a point where I was banging my head against the wall and it wasn't worth it. I had to just record the narration. So anyway, thank you for listening, and God bless.